Howdy nerds, my name's River. Welcome back to Wind Swirls and Leaps. So today's going to be a bit of a chatty video. We're going to be talking about morning pages, the journaling style that was popularized by Julia Cameron in the Artist Way. So I wanted to attempt to complete the Artist Way for many years. I had known about it for a really long time, but about 2 years ago, after seeing everything that was required, I realized that as a chronically ill and disabled individual, it just wasn't accessible to me for many reasons. Now, despite giving up on trying to complete the entire program, morning pages continued to call to me. I don't know what it was about them, but I was always attracted to that type of journaling, and I loved watching videos of people talking about morning pages or their experience with the Artist Way. The few times that I had journaled in the same style, like brain dumping, I always felt lighter, but I never started a dedicated habit of stream of conscious brain dump journaling, honestly because I was too afraid. Morning pages are a method for listening to your inner creative, and I was really scared to do that, and I'll talk about that more later on in this video. A couple months ago, back in August, the method was screaming out to me louder than ever before. So I decided to reread the morning pages chapter in the Artist's Way, and I spent a little time decorating a notebook, this one here. Those are some stamps from Paper and Pencil, the amazing stationery store in Chicago. And I decorated the inside as well, and the back. So, on September 1st, 2025, I wrote my first entry. At the time of me filming this now, it's been 2 months of doing morning pages, and I haven't missed a single day. In this video, I'm going to talk about the 3 main things I've learned from 2 months of morning pages, and I'm going to include a 4th bonus idea. So, I wrote out the main ideas I want to touch on this index card to keep myself on track. The first one, as you can see, is that I've learned that morning pages offer solitude and self-awareness. In terms of solitude, morning pages allow you to start your morning in a slow, gentle way. Instead of jumping into your to-dos, you check in with yourself first. I know a lot of people are afraid of solitude and afraid of spending too much time with themselves, but we all know that there are so many benefits to solitude. I'm actually really lucky in that I have a lot of solitude in my day-to-day life built in. I spend a lot of hours alone, and I'm also really intentional to not fill my silence with other people's thoughts. Constant content like music or podcasts in the background actually lead me to feeling overwhelmed and overstimulated and honestly kind of anxious. In fact, one judgment I had about morning pages, which really was just like a masked fear, was that I wouldn't learn that much about myself because I already spend plenty of time with my own thoughts. And I thought, I'm already engaged with my own thoughts and feelings, so nothing I noticed in morning pages will be too surprising. And while it's true that the things that come up in my morning pages aren't surprising, like I could have easily guessed which topics would come up over and over again, writing them down in a journal reflects back the importance or non-importance of those things. So like your morning pages become a mirror to reflect yourself back to yourself. And in doing so, you develop a relationship with yourself that you just didn't have before, even if you've spent a lot of time alone and in your head. Basically, what you're doing is you're externalizing your thoughts by writing them down. And when you do that, when you externalize your thoughts, you can identify and acknowledge the things that are important to you, the things that scare you, and the things that make you, you. And then you can process those things to improve your life. And you can understand yourself in a more objective way. I've had the experience a couple times now where I'm writing these negative thoughts about myself for multiple pages, and by the last page, I'm honestly kind of sick of listening to my inner critic, and I can recognize that these thoughts aren't good for me, and it ends up being an opportunity to be kind to myself. I can offer myself a new perspective. I can start writing out affirmations or talk about the ways in which I'm proud of myself, and then my mood is lifted as I go about the rest of my day. So by checking in with myself and learning about myself in this way, my days are better. The second thing that I've learned is that morning pages clear my mind and therefore improve my focus for language learning. So at some point in week 1 of doing morning pages, I was talking about the method of journaling with my wife who had done them before, and they said something that stuck with me about how morning pages is actually a pretty easy method of journaling. They said, you know, like our mind just keeps going. We're never going to stop having new thoughts. So just keep listening to your mind and dumping the thoughts on the page. So I followed that advice, and I found that by putting my thoughts on paper, they are significantly less likely to be floating around in my head all day. This isn't really novel information. I think most of us know this, but I think it's important to remember how significantly this can affect your life. This is especially useful for negative thoughts. I don't have to ruminate on these things because something about getting the thoughts on paper gives your brain enough permission to let them go. I've found that morning pages also offer the opportunity to process your emotions so that they won't weigh you down during the rest of the day. You end up being able to just let go of a lot of anxieties just by giving them the brief attention of writing them down. So, what does this have to do with language learning? Well, at the start of 2025, I began studying Spanish primarily because it's my wife's first language, and I'm learning through the comprehensible input method of language learning. With comprehensible input, you spend many hours listening to the language you're trying to learn. You have to be actively paying attention to acquire the language. At this point in my Spanish journey, I'm listening to 2 hours of Spanish every single morning. And I don't know about y'all, but after my cell phone addiction completely destroyed my ability to concentrate, 2 hours is now a really long time to be focusing on something. But I found that my ability to focus on Spanish has definitely improved after incorporating morning pages into my routine. So my mornings look like this. I wake up, I take my pills, and I immediately start journaling while sitting up in bed. And then when I'm done writing, I get up, I make my breakfast, and I immediately start listening to Spanish while eating breakfast. Without a million thoughts distracting me from Spanish, the 2 hours now fly by rather than drag on because I'm able to actually focus. I'm not perfect, and I still have days where I struggle to concentrate, but there's definitely been a very noticeable difference. So the third thing I've learned is that morning pages lead to creativity and problem solving. During the intro of this video, I mentioned how I procrastinated starting morning pages for years because I was too afraid to face my inner creative. We all have so many personal hangups and self-doubt when it comes to creativity, and I am no different. I have OCD and OCPD, and I struggle with perfectionism, and I have my whole life. So honestly, participating in my own creativity can often feel overwhelming. When we're overwhelmed, aka our brains have too much information to process, it makes it so much easier to procrastinate. And I have spent my whole life procrastinating making art because I was overwhelmed. Morning pages have allowed me to work through the things that feel overwhelming. And by working through them, I've had creative insights. And it's not just new creative insights, but perhaps more importantly, it's that I've been able to give attention to creative ideas that have already been there. Ideas that have been there for years are getting the attention they need to turn into something real. Writing about my ideas gives them space to grow and to change, and writing out my ideas allows me to process and figure out action steps to get them accomplished. I was talking to my wife about this, and they said a really amazing thing that I wrote down. They said, morning pages allow you to grow all the seeds you had planted but never nurtured. Isn't that beautiful? If you aren't following Robbie, their channel is always linked in my description box of my videos, so definitely check out their channel if you aren't subscribed already. So speaking of seeds that I had planted but never nurtured, this YouTube channel is the biggest one. I've wanted to make a YouTube channel for probably 6 or 7 years, and I will say that in the past 6 months, like to a year, I had been planning it even more than ever, but I still hadn't started. And one of my biggest hangups I had regarding this channel is that after the first few videos, I thought that I would run out of ideas. It was truly one of the last things that was holding me back from starting. I was telling myself I couldn't do it because I didn't have enough ideas. And on day 10 of Morning Pages, I broke through that hang up. So here's what happened. The first 9 days of journaling Morning Pages, nothing too creative had really come up. I was just getting into the routine of it, and most of what I was brain dumping were things related to my personal day-to-day life. And I was skeptical that Morning Pages would lead to helping my creativity. So on day 10 of journaling Morning Pages, I decided to address that skepticism head on, and I specifically journaled about my fear of running out of video ideas. I ended up listing out 40, yes, 40 YouTube video ideas. It was like a dam broke open, and I saw myself and my YouTube channel in a completely new light. I'm actually going to open up my journal and read what I wrote after listing out those ideas. That's 40 ideas. Obviously, I surprised myself. Avoiding this task of listing out video ideas is holding me back from starting my YouTube channel. Yeah, not all of these are perfect or worthy of whole videos, but it's way more of a start than I even thought I had. What's going to be my next excuse as to why I'm not starting? I'm going to repeat that last question I wrote. What's going to be my next excuse as to why I'm not starting? So, what did I do next? I explored that question thoroughly. For the next 5 weeks, I kept journaling about this YouTube channel. I journaled about my fears, about the logistics, about my ideas, and it came up almost every day, or at least like 5 days a week. And as Julia Cameron says in The Artist's Way, it is very difficult to complain about a situation morning after morning, month after month, without being moved to constructive action. 6 weeks into Morning Pages, I filmed my first YouTube video, and 7 weeks in, I posted it. Do I credit Morning Pages and only Morning Pages for that push to start my channel? No. Like I said earlier, in the past 6 to 12 months, I had already started to plan my channel out in more concrete ways, but Morning Pages forced me to confront why it was taking me so long and what exactly I needed to take action on to get my first video posted. Okay, so there is a fourth bonus thing that I've learned, and that is that Morning Pages allow me to engage in my hobby in a really rewarding way. So if you're subscribed to this channel, you know that stationery and planning and fountain pens, these are my biggest hobbies, right? And with Morning Pages, I get to pick out what pens I want to use. I get to fill up notebooks, and depending on the notebook, I get to take the time to decorate it. I already showed this first one, but I also used some basic field notes, and I was able to decorate them, which was really fun. But even more exciting than that is that I found that I've been able to let go of the fear or the guilt or that preciousness that a lot of us have about using our nice stuff. I think if you're a journaling person and you enjoy notebooks and pens, you've experienced that feeling I'm talking about of this journal is so nice and I'm afraid to use it. I don't know what to write on the first page. I have to have the perfect idea before I start using this notebook. And then we end up hoarding it for a really long time, right? And then when we do finally muster up the courage to use it, we still have that first page fear of, am I gonna mess up? And we treat it really preciously until we're halfway through the journal, and then it's just messy and scribbled and horrible handwriting, and we've let go of that fear. I have definitely struggled with that feeling of using up my nice stuff, and I would say it's getting to the point where it's almost non-existent for me now. So here's what happened. About a year ago, actually maybe a year and a half ago, Robbie gifted me this field notes box, this really nice box to store your pocket notebooks in, and this entire pack of the National Park Field Notes series. So these 4 here, and then I think all of these are from the National Parks collection. And I mean, I was overwhelmed by this gift. It was such a sweet gift, and I was so excited by it. But in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, like these field notes journals are so nice. I'm gonna have to come up with this like really special idea for them. And the obvious idea is that, you know, you take them with you when you travel to a national park. So I was like, okay, yes, like Yosemite National Parks field notes. I'm gonna use this when we go to Yosemite. But like, when are we going to Yosemite? You know what I mean? Like, sure, at some point in my life, I'm gonna try to make it to all of these beautiful national parks. I would love that. That's a dream, but there's no concrete plan as to when I'm gonna visit these national parks, right? And so I was just gonna hoard this entire pack of notebooks pretty much for the rest of my life and not get to use them and enjoy them. However, when I took a look at my notebook collection, when I was gonna get started doing morning pages, I saw, you know, like all the different sizes I had, A4 and A5 and B6 and A6, and then I also had these pocket notebooks and this one passport notebook. And I was like, you know that most people probably start in an A5 to do their 3 pages, but that's a little intimidating to me. I think I'm gonna start small. And I decided to start with the smallest notebook I had, the passport notebook. And instead of doing 3 pages, I was like, I'll just double it and I'll do 6, because that seems, you know, more in line with the 3 pages that are required in the artist's way. So when I was looking through the notebook, I was like, oh, I'm gonna be able to finish this notebook in 10 days if I do 6 pages per day. And I was like, that is so satisfying. And I know that if you're in this hobby, you also feel that way, right? Like finishing up a notebook, when we complete a notebook, it just feels so good to flip through it and see all of our writing in it. And then I was looking at the field notes and I was like, oh, these are only 48 pages. I'll be done with these in 8 days if I write 6 pages per day. And I like did a little math and I was like, I'll be done with all of these notebooks in less than 6 months if I use them for morning pages. And something about that felt so much more rewarding, so much more satisfying than saving them for some future experience that I wasn't even sure I was gonna have. And now I'm flying through my notebooks, and at some point not too far in the future, I'm gonna have completed every single one of these pocket notebooks I have. Side note, if you all haven't heard of Dapper Notes, I highly recommend this company. The guy who makes these notebooks is just the most amazing artist, and I highly recommend getting on this subscription service if you can. All right, so those are the 4 things that I've learned from 2 months of morning pages. I would love to talk to you in the comments of this video about your thoughts and your experiences with morning pages. Do you do morning pages? How long have you been doing them for? And if you've been doing them for years, do you have any tips or warnings even for what's still to come for me? Let me know. And with that, thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.